What's up everyone, it's Victon here with another Path of Exile build guide. Today we're going to be going over a sort of niche but super fun build, the Saqawal's Flock Tornado build. This build utilizes a set of very specific unique items with very specific modifiers to pump out a ton of tornadoes per second as you run around the map, absolutely melting everything in your wake with poison damage. Now, this won't be a full-on build guide like I normally do, as I really just started playing this build and there's already a fantastic written forum guide out there by the original build creator. I will have a link in the description to his forum post, so definitely check that out if you guys are interested. I did still want to throw up this build guide on my experience playing the build and some of the choices that I've made along its creation to best suit the content I want to play. Before we get into all that, if you end up enjoying this guide, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. I have tons of build guides already out and a whole bunch of general tips and tricks videos for Path of Exile, so definitely go give those a check if you're interested. Overall, I'd give this build an A rank, since it has some really awesome things about it, but it does have some few downsides. Farming maps is incredibly fun, and I would give this one an S rank. You literally only have to run around and you kind of just fart out tornadoes that you do really good poison damage with, and everything kind of just dies behind you. You can actually start doing this build from level 68, so right away when you start doing maps, and this is easily going to take you up to tier 16 maps with ease. I've been farming tier 16 maps with 40% delirium on them, and it's been very smooth so far. For boss killing, I would have to give this one a B rank. It can certainly kill bosses, but it takes a bit of time to do so. What I'd recommend is you focus this character on farming maps for you and making currency that way. For survivability, I'd give it an A+. It actually has a decent life pool, near capped dodge and spell dodge, the Wind Dancer passive, insane life gain on spell hit, and the general fact that you're always running around and staying away from monsters is pretty solid. You're still going to get random one-shot deaths in those tier 16 40% delirium juiced maps, but it's not too often, so we're going to stick with that A+ ranking here. For damage, I'd give this another A+. Like I said, I'm easily clearing tier 16 maps with 40% delirium, which is more than enough to start making you guys a ton of currency. Stepping past 40% juice delirium maps, your damage does start to fall off slightly. We're going to go over it in the gear section, but there is a way to significantly increase your DPS, but it makes the build cost go up just a little bit. With those upgrades, I'm confident that you could easily do 100% delirium tier 16 maps, no problem. As far as build cost, it's actually pretty cheap to start up. For the budget starter version of this build, I'd say you're going to only spend about 8 to 10 exalts to get a pretty good set of starter gear. That's going to get you everything that you need to start slinging tornadoes at level 68. As you min-max the build over time, you're going to end up spending about 50 to 70 exalts, and that's where you're going to be able to do those tier 16 100% delirium fully juiced maps. For the footage that you're seeing right now, I have spent about 20 exalts on my gear, and like I said, I can clear tier 16 40% delirium maps no problem. For build viability, sadly, I think this is only viable in softcore league and on a trade league. We have so many uniques in this build, so solo self-found is out, and for hardcore, you do occasionally get those random one-shots, so again, that's a no-go for hardcore. But yeah, that was a brief overview of this build, so let's go ahead and hop into Path of Building, where we're going to go over the skill tree, the gem links, and lastly, the gear. Alright, so we are in Path of Building, so what I'm going to do is show you guys kind of how to level up this build first. First and foremost, I think you guys should level this build up with Blade, Fall, Blade Blast, Poison. That's what I did, and it was very smooth all the way up to 68, at which point I did my tornadoes. So I don't have a leveling kind of path here, which I normally do. What I'm going to do instead is just kind of show you the route that I would take personally, which I did when I was leveling up. So first thing to note is these cluster jewels here, you're going to get that absolutely last. So don't pick that up as you're going. That's going to be like once you get into maps. So basically what I did is I went and I got all of this up here first. And then I just came down and then I got all of this over here. It was so very, very simple. I went up first and then I went down all the way here. So really important to note though is that fatal toxins and these poison nodes are very important for your poison as you're leveling up. Getting as much poison chance leveling up is very, very important because we do want to hit as close to 100% chance to poison for it to feel pretty smooth while you're leveling up. And while we're talking about poison here, I will mention a couple things. Just so you guys know, poison, the tornado skill is a spell. It's not an attack, it's a spell. So we do need to get nodes that have poison to spell damage. So we are going to be anointing our amulet with Serpentine Spellslinger. It's got some great damage on it as well, but it also has 15% chance to poison on hit with spell damage. So that comboed with this node over here, Septic Spells, 20% chance to poison on hit with spell damage. We do have 100% chance to poison with Dark Tornadoes. So it's very important to mention that, because you absolutely need this specific medium cluster jewel in order to get that 100% poison chance. If you don't have it, it's going to feel really bad. I would actually just try to follow my cluster jewels here as close as possible, and you will feel pretty good. A few things about the build here. Just kind of high level, we do get Wind Dancer for some great tankiness, and also same thing with the Acrobats and Phase Acrobats. So those two things right there are going to make you feel pretty tanky. We get life anywhere that we can get life. We're trying to pick up life. Over here, I do want to mention that this window of opportunity node, these 3 nodes right here for reduced skill effect duration, is incredibly important. You'll hear me talk about that multiple times through this build guide. We want as much reduced skill effect duration as possible. That is what's going to get us the most amount of tornadoes flying out of our butt. So we want that very, very much. So, and don't go the tornado until you have these. You should have those probably when you start tornadoes, so don't worry about that. I think you just want to make sure that you get those before you go tornadoes. So as far as the cluster jewels here themselves, basically what we have going on here is Grim Oath, Touch of Cruelty, and Overwhelming Malice. That is the most damage that you're going to get for a large cluster jewel. And remember, we have harvest crafting, so you can harvest craft these a little bit to help out. And I would suggest going over to Craft of Exile. If you guys want, you can kind of tell how to craft these specifically. So for example, this Grim Oath right here, right? So if you buy a large cluster jewel with Overwhelming Malice and Touch of Cruelty, you can actually force Grim Oath with a physical, an augment physical. So very, very easy to get that. Not too bad. It's not going to cost you too much. Just make sure you do that trick with the Overwhelming Malice, Touch of Cruelty, and then augment physical. Or you can just buy one, whatever you want to do. So going back over here, for our medium clusters, we do have an Eternal Suffering. So 50% chance to inflict Withered. That comboed with our skills, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We do have, anytime that we use Withering Step, it's automatically going to cast 15 Withering stacks on the enemy. So very, very good. Max Withering stacks is 15, so it's max every time you cast that. Very, very good. Exposure Therapy we actually have twice over here, and that's just a ton of damage. You will notice over here that I have some small cluster jewels, which usually don't go in builds, but a couple things. We do want as much life as possible, since we're a little life starved until you get some choice items. But until then, we do get these items here, but also more importantly than the life is the strength. We're very low on strength, and we need a lot of strength in order to get some of our items. So you need to make sure that you get small cluster jewels with strength. So you can see I have a little bit here, but on this one I do have 8 strength. So that's 16 strength right there. Very, very important to get as much strength as possible. You'll also notice that I have the strength node here and here, and then I also have an intelligence node here. Our gear is pretty much all uniques, so you're not going to get as much chances as you would normally in a build to get a bunch of strength, a bunch of intelligence. You have to get it on your tree, which just kind of is what it is. It sucks, but it is what it is. So for our actual jewels here, we'll kind of go over a couple things that you're looking out for your jewels. Your jewels are very important in this build for a couple reasons. One is your elemental resists. Again, we have pretty much all unique items, and almost all of them have absolutely no elemental resist on them. So we're getting as much elemental resist on our jewels as possible. I would even suggest dropping some damage and some of the life for as much elemental resist as you can as you're gearing up the character. That's what I did, and it was fine. A couple other things to note on here. You obviously want life. The best thing that you could get is life, elemental resists, and then physical damage added to spells. Now you can get physical damage added to spells like you see there, and you can also get physical damage added to spells while using a two-hander, because we are using a staff. So both of those are very, very good. As far as the other jewels that we have here, this is a personal preference. You can do this or not do this, but I am going self-poison because that's just super, super strong right now. Basically, we're going to be using all of this poison chance to poison ourselves up to 100 times and that is going to give us a significant boost to our damage and move speed if we have the Sextant that gives you damage and move speed based off of how many poisons are on you. You don't need that for this build at all. You can run this build without that Sextant modifier completely fine, and I've done the same thing with 40% Delirium Tier 16, and it was just fine. It just took longer than normal. Someone's wanting to buy my items. Let's go ahead and exit out of Path of Exile. So you can do it, but obviously if you get the Sextant, you just clear the map so much faster, and it is absolutely crazy how much movement speed you have, and it's super, super fun. So I did go ahead and put that in there just in case I ever got that Sextant mod on my the Sextants while I'm rolling regular maps. I'm perfect. I can just absolutely blast that map, and it's super, super fun. But you guys do not need this if you don't want to do it. And for that though, you absolutely, if you go with the self-poison, so if you go with this, the golden rule to self-poison yourself, you 100% need a Watcher's Eye with unaffected by poison while affected by malevolence. Really important note to note here though is your malevolence should only be a level 1 malevolence. The higher you level up your malevolence, it actually gives you increased skill effect duration and makes you poop out less tornadoes. Very, very bad. So we're gonna do that. And also know that if you don't have that Sextant that you're rolling on the map, edit. And we're back. All right, so if you don't have that Sextant on the map, one thing that I would absolutely do is remove malevolence from your scale. Just turn malevolence off because it actually does hurt you. You start out with 10% increased skill effect duration with malevolence level 1, and it goes way up to a level 20. That's why you never want more than a level 1. And if you don't have that Sextant modifier on your map, then go ahead and turn malevolence off and you'll poop out more tornadoes. So very important to note there. And also if you're partying with other people, if they have a big boy malevolence like a level 20, it will hurt how many tornadoes that you can put out at a time. I think that basically covers it for the actual tree here. That's everything that I wanted to mention. Obviously we'll go over the Ascendancy real quick. The first node that you want to pick up while leveling up is Noxious Strike. It's just more poison chance and it's a ton of damage, and then from there we go up to Toxic Delivery for more damage. After that, I personally went with Mistwalker as my third node. It's going to give you Elusive on crit, which you're basically always critting, so you're always going to have Elusive. Very, very good for defenses, for getting your attack and spell dodge up very high. Very, very good. And your last node would be Opportunistic for some extra defenses and a little bit more damage for single target damage on bosses. So this is your setup for your Ascendancy. So let's go ahead and go over to our skills. Now, one thing to note here is your tornado actually comes from your item, the Saqawal's Flock, the Silken Hood. So let's go over to the item real quick and I'll just show you guys. So as you can see here, it triggers level 20 tornado when you gain Avian's Might and Avian's Flight. So anytime you gain those skills, it cycles through, it's gonna poop out a bunch of tornadoes, okay? So very important to note, and we'll talk about that in the gear section here in a little bit, because we want to, that's why we're using reduced duration as much as possible, because we want those buffs, the Avian's Might buff and the Avian's Flight buff, to come down in reduction of the skill effect duration as much as possible, so that the buff lasts very, very little time, so it's getting a lot of tornadoes popping out. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but for this specifically, trigger level 20 tornado when you gain Avian's Might or Flight. So that's how we're getting the tornado from this helmet. So let's go back to the actual tornado here. The gems that we're going to be using is Greater Multiple Projectiles. If you don't have Awaken, don't worry about it, you'll be just fine. Greater Multiple Projectiles, Vile Toxins, Deadly Ailments, and Increased Duration. Increased Duration is actually pretty important because we have so much reduced duration on the tree in our items that if you did not have this, it would actually feel pretty bad and your tornadoes would go away pretty fast. So that's your 4-link for your tornadoes. Moving on to Plague Bearer, which is actually a ton of damage. Your Plague Bearer does a ton of damage. We have Plague Bearer, Getting a level 21 is actually pretty good. We do have Empower and Enhance. If you guys don't have level 4s, don't worry about it. You can do level 3s. That's much cheaper to do Empower and Enhance level 3. That's actually what I had in the gameplay footage you guys saw earlier, was a 3 and a 3. And we do want Increase of Area of Effect, just to make that Plague Bearer have a lot of area effect and kill a lot of monsters doing that, because it's so much damage. Until you get Awakened Increased Area of Effect, I would suggest going with Divergent, because it gives a little bit more area of effect. Pretty good. Moving on to our utility skill here, we have Lightning Warp as our movement skill, which is actually super fun. You're used to probably having Lightning Warp tape forever, but we have so much reduced duration on our tree, our items, and our skill here that it's actually incredibly quick. You can move around the map so fast with Lightning Warp. It's very fun. I would only do level 1 because mana is kind of an issue for us, so you want to be casting this as much as possible. I just keep it at level 1, and I'm able to use it pretty much indefinitely, just kind of zooming around the map with level 1 Lightning Warp. So from there, we also have reduced duration. Now, real quick though, this is very important. Let's go over to our items here. These boots, right? So as you can see on here, it grants level 20 aspect of the avian, okay? And as we talked about with the tornadoes, any of these skill gems in that item affect that skill. So going over to our boots, grants level 20 aspect of the avian. Any skills that we have in those boots is going to affect aspect of the avian. So let's go back over to our boots here, and we have less duration, Swift Affliction. I have Awakened. If you guys don't have that, don't worry, at least get Swift Affliction. And those two things right there is going to make your aspect of the avian have very little skill effect duration. It's going to take it down very low, which is what we want, because the lower it is, the faster it switches between avian and might, and the more tornadoes pop out, if that makes sense to you guys. So the higher that you have over here, or the lower that you have your reduced duration, the better. And that goes all the way up to, when you get Awakened Swift Affliction, it's 25%, which is just a regular Swift Afflictions. I think it's 10 or 15%, so very good to get. Now we also have Vitality here. If you guys do not have that Watcher's Eye setup that I have for self-poison, as you can see over here for the self-poison with Golden Rule, and this last one for Watcher's Eye, to get Vitality, it's very important. So I just wanted to mention this on the Watcher's Eye. You absolutely need the 30 life gain on hit for each enemy while affected Vitality. You should get that on a Watcher's Eye, regardless if you're doing self-poison or not. It's actually cheap. It's not very expensive. You can get it for like 20-30 chaos, and that is going to give you so much life gain on hit, because you have so many tornadoes spinning around. If you ever take damage, your health is going to go boop, all the way back up instantly, because of that life gained on hit while affected by Vitality. So that is why we have a Vitality in our skills here. We're actually not using it for the life regen, we're only using it to proc that Watcher's Eye. So if you don't have that Watcher's Eye, you don't need Vitality right here, but I would absolutely suggest you guys getting it, because it's so much defenses. I only put mine at a level 1, because again, you only need it to be able to proc your Watcher's Eye. Moving on to our weapon, which is going to be a Disintegrator. I'll talk about that here in a second. We want it's a 6-socket, 4-link, and 2-link setup. Cast when damage taken, or you can even do 2-link, 2-link, 2-link. But the 2 links that you want here is cast when damage taken, a Mortal Call. You also want Malevolence at level 1, like I mentioned earlier, only level 1 with an Enlighten. You only have to do level Enlighten level 3, not a big deal. But you don't have to do this combo if you're not using that self-poison. Remember how I said if you have the Watcher's Eye and the Golden Rule? If you don't have those and you're just playing the build normally, you do not need Malevolence or Enlighten. So after that, on your same 6-socket item right there, you do want a Withering Step, Second Wind. What I would suggest, if you guys don't have this Enlightened Malevolence, take those out, right? And on your Withering Step, you could also put in Enhance, which is very good. That will get you your 15 Withering stacks every time you use Withering Step on the boss. So very good. And then there was that aspect of the avian, and as you can see here, it's being affected by less duration and Swift Affliction. Moving on to our items here, we've kind of already talked about a few of these, but the Disintegrator Staff is just giving you a whole bunch of flat physical damage to your spells. Very good. That's really the big thing that we're looking at here with this item, because our tornadoes actually do very little damage, flat damage. So we want as much flat damage added to our build as possible so that we can scale those tornadoes appropriately. So as much flat damage as possible, that is why the staff is the best option here. and you can just 6-socket it. You don't have to 6-link it, so that's not too bad. Moving on to our helmet, we already talked about this one. It's going to give us that level 20 tornado. The rolls here don't really matter, so just make sure we get one, maybe as much life and resistance as you can. For our body armor, we're actually going with a Comb's Heart, where there's a couple choices that you can do here. Comb's Heart is the cheapest and the most defensive out of the options. That's what's giving us our 5,900 HP. These things are like 10 chaos right now. Very, very cheap. Some of the other options that you can do, if you want to farm those 100% delirium maps, you can choose this. It is a chest that has enemies you kill explode. It also has frenzy charge on hit and power charge on hit. One thing to note is it's actually very easy to hit that power charge on hit with harvest crafting. You can just slam a critical mod and it'll get that power charge on critical strike very, very easily. So that is a pretty, I would say that's the mid-tier option that you can do. I don't know if I would honestly do this. I would say if you're going to do anything besides Comb Heart, I would go for this option right here. It's called Replica Shroud of the Lightless. It has 6 abyssal sockets. Like I mentioned earlier, we want as much physical flat damage added to our build as possible. So with these, you can have 6 jewels and we can get a ton of added flat damage. And you can also get life, and you can also get your elemental resistances up. So very, very good option, but it is expensive. Right now, I think it's about 20 to 25 exalt for this chest. So just note that, whereas the Comb's Heart was 10 chaos, right? So just kind of do whatever you want, but getting those, getting that body armor will put you up to being able to do tier 16 100% delirious maps. So moving on to our gloves here. These are very important. The gloves and the boots, there's one thing that is incredibly important with this. You see that line right there, minus 1.96 seconds to Avian's Might duration. You want as much minus as you can get. It goes up to minus 2%. You want to get as close to 2% as possible. We do not want plus seconds to Avian's Might. That actually ruins the build, because again, we want our duration of our Avian's Might as low as possible, so that it's pooping out tornadoes as much as possible, right? So as low as possible here. Same thing with the boots. Negative 1.9, that's almost perfect to Avian's flight duration. We want to get those as low as possible. You don't have to get close to that 2% mark. It's a lot cheaper of an item if you get one like minus 1.8 or so. You can pick those up for like an exalt, even maybe a little bit less. But once you get up to the close to the 2%, that's when it jumps up to maybe like a 5 exalt item. So it just depends on your budget. You can go, I would try and stay up at least around the 1.6 range and above to start out, and then just get the next level up as you can. So very, very important for those. One thing for the boots that I would say for you guys is if you can get the enchant through the lab, what is it? Is it 80% reduced chance to be stunned if you've killed an enemy recently? That's the best enchant that you can get. Being stunned in this build is the worst. It basically gets you killed. That's one of the only things that gets you killed in this build, is being stunned. So getting that right there is perfect. If you're not able to get it, you're going to get stunned every once in a while, but if you get it, you'll never be stunned. Very, very good. Moving on to our amulet here. Again, reduced skill effect duration. That is the most important stat on this. If you can get a little bit of movement speed, that is nice. And of course, we're allocating Serpentine Spellslinger like I mentioned earlier. But getting that 15% reduced skill effect duration is the most important thing that you're doing on that amulet. For our rings, same thing here. These are actually Time Twist rings, which are upgraded version of, I think, the Time Clasp rings. And to get these rings, you can actually do the prophecy. It's called a Rift in Time. That's like 1 chaos. You can actually buy the Time Clasp for 1 chaos and a Rift in Time for 1 chaos, and you run the map Laboratory. And if you do all of that, you do it over and over and over again, you have a 1 in 21 chance of getting the minus or the 10% reduced skill effect duration. A lot of people are selling these 10% for expensive, like 5 to 8 exalts. Don't do that. You can get the Rift in Time prophecy and do these yourself, and you can craft one for about 1 exalt max. That 10%, it takes a little bit of time, so you can either pay for it yourself, spend the extra currency, or you can make one yourself and get it a lot cheaper. And I would say even anything above that 9% reduced skill effect duration is fine. Obviously you want the 10, but a 9% is okay as well. Moving on to our belt, looks kind of scary, but it's not too bad to craft yourself. You want really just a high life and increase maximum life if you can get it. If you can't, that's fine. Chaos damage is fantastic, and getting as much resistance on it as possible is very, very good here. Remember harvest crafting, so you can augment fire, cold, lightning for some resistances. Very good. You can augment the chaos for chaos damage on there, so it's not too bad to craft that. If you don't have something that good, it's totally fine. I would say the last thing you want on that is the chaos damage. But make sure it is a Stygian Vise, because we do want to put a jewel in there. And actually a very good jewel to get here, guys, is chance to gain phasing for 4 seconds on kill. We do have phasing on our flasks, which I'll show you in a second, but getting it on kill as well is it's going to make sure that it's up 100% of the time. And phasing is so important in this build, so you can run through mobs, because that's the whole point of the build. It's running in circles, running in circles. And if you don't have phasing and then you get caught up on something, you die. So that's not good. That's also why we want that stun chance immunity. So moving on to our flasks here, we do get a Carlitos signature, which is just going to help you with a ton of damage for your poisons. Moving on to this one, we want freeze removal and we want stun immunity. So getting something like this with this 50% chance to avoid being stunned, along with those boots, which is the 80%, you will have 100% stun immunity. So very, very good. And I just put that on a Quicksilver flask so I can run even faster. But freeze, definitely get freeze on the second flask. Do not neglect your flasks, guys. They're incredibly important. I do have an Adziri's Promise for a whole bunch of damage and also some life leech. So very, very good. Adziri's Promise is a very strong item. For my last one here, I have a Forbidden Taste. I have this only if you have the self-poison. If you are not doing self-poison, do not use this. If you're doing self-poison, you will have a lot of chaos resist. As you see here, I have 75. That golden rule gem, I'll show you right here. Poisons you inflict is redirected at you, but you also have 1% chaos resist per poison. So you actually have 100% chaos res with this jewel. So if you have that much chaos res, getting a flask like Forbidden Taste, which makes you take chaos damage, it's basically, it does nothing to you, and you just get the full effect of recovering full life when you use the flask. If you do not have the self-poison stuff, just get a regular flask, a regular life flask with like bleed immunity on it. That's what I would do. Now, we've already talked about all of our medium cluster jewels, so I won't need to go into there. And we crashed. But guess what? That was actually the build, guys. That's everything you actually need to know about this build in order to get it going and all the way up until in-game. Like I said, I've been playing it for a few days. I've had a great time myself playing it. It's very, very fun. I think it's very unique as well. Props to the build creator for sure. It's a very unique build. It's clear in tier 16 maps with 40% delirium, absolutely with ease. With a little bit more investment, I think you could do the 100% delirium. And overall, I think it's a successful build. I had a lot of fun playing it, and I hope you guys have a lot of fun playing it too. If you guys do choose to play this build, let me know in the comment section how you fare with it. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you changed something about it, let me know as well. I'd be happy to look into that. That's all I got on this one, guys. I will see you all in the next build guide. Y'all have a good day.